So as I said, this is what my beard looks like with, without the scruffy neck hair stuff. It's actually a lot longer than it appears. Plus, I have that weird Mediterranean trait where your hair, once it gets to a certain length, it starts curling up. That's why I always have to be very greasy kind of hair pushed back. It doesn't get. It's not like my sister's that winds up, curl. Well, my sister who just passed curled up. I remember we always had flattening irons in our house, when I was younger. But my journey from Christianity to Islam, well, my mother is Roman Catholic, and my father was from a Muslim background. And as you know, the kids are raised Muslim if the father's Muslim, and that it's not permitted for a Christian man to marry a Muslim woman, but it's permitted for a Muslim man to marry a Christian or a Jewish woman. But my parents were both very Americanized, very modern, very. They liked Reagan back in the 80s. I think everybody did. I don't want to say everybody. But I can remember growing up asking my father which party is the correct party. Is Democrats or Republicans? He says, well, they're both got good points and both got bad points. That has since changed. But I was kind of the one that was more pushed towards. My brothers and sisters all have mainly Latino names. Some of my names are Latino too, but use of that name that was. And it's funny. I asked my parents, well, because on my birth certificate there was white out, and there was several different names that were whited out and gone back through. And said, well, who named you this? And my mother says, oh, it's your father's idea, and my dad says, oh, it's your mother's idea. I'm inclined to believe it's my father's idea. My mother was correct. So, studying it from around 7th grade, I remember being very angered at the Oklahoma City bombing of the Murrah Federal Building, them immediately blaming Muslims. I was very irritated. I believe I was in 8th grade, maybe 6th. It goes back further, my interest in Islam, but when I was actually bought a Quran and started reading it was 7th grade. And then it was 8th grade and freshman year that I started going to the masjid, and I got very politicized in that. And I started learning about Hazrat Umar, Abu Bakr, Khalid bin Walid. Khalid bin Walid disturbed me a lot of the things of his life, his actions, of his sayings, and there were certain things that Muhammad did that I found out because at the beginning it looked a lot better, and I always self-identified as a Muslim because I always believed there was one God. Even when I was younger, I'd be arguing with my CCV teacher saying the Trinity is pagan, and they got it from the pagans or the ancient Romans, all these silly things, which now I argue against. It was when I started looking at the character and the life of Muhammad, and comparing and contrasting it to Jesus, because I remember my dad sitting me down and reading me the Gospel according to Mark and the Sermon on the Mount, and he says these are the only things you can trust in the Bible, and that even they're corrupted, but these are the main sources, and that this is the most correct stuff in the Bible, and don't listen to the rest of it. And I had gone through and read parts of the Gospels, and at one point I was living near Wheaton, which is Wheaton College is like the most evangelical college you can find. It's got the Billy Graham Center there. It's Bart Ehrman went there. I mean, it's the fundamentalist college for fundamentalists. It's the fundamentalists of the fundamentalists college. And it's almost Ivy League. It's very prestigious, and you get a good education there. But it's kind of irritating dealing with those people. I remember when I told somebody this is when I was very younger, very young. They were trying to proselytize to me, and they said, "Well, my mother's a Catholic," and they said that's the whore of Babylon. They were meaning the Catholic Church, but in that context, I don't know these biblical terms. I just wham right in his face, and then boom, I kicked him as he was falling down. And his other friend took off running, because they usually come in pairs and they proselytize. And I was kind of worried. I'm like, oh crap! So I took off, and then I ran back a little. I said, "You ever say anything about my ma again? I'll fucking kill you." And the kid's crying with his nose bleeding, but I kind of feel bad about that now. But no, I was looking at like Muhammad found a woman actually confided in him and said, "Look, I've committed adultery." Or I fornicated. And he said, "Go away and come back until you know you're pregnant or not." She says, "I'm pregnant." He says, "Go away until the child is born." So she comes back, and he says, "Go away and until the child's weaned." She says, "Okay, I have the child's weaned." Then he said, "Okay, kill her." Jesus found a woman caught in adultery, started drawing on the ground, just distract the attention away from the woman, said, "He who was without sin cast the first stone." It was things like that. It was things like, Christ taught, turn the other cheek, and Muhammad did for a while until he gained control of Medina. Christ also always lived up to what he said. He always did. He was at the forefront. He needed to fulfill all these things. He couldn't take comfort in being a hypocrite or a liar or turning away or going into cowardice or anything like this. The Gospels, they show the apostles always screwing up and him forgiving them, and he even said to Peter, "You're going to deny me," and he said, "No, I'd never do such a thing," and Peter denies him. He makes Peter basically like chief among the apostles, basically. Don't take that in a paper way. I don't mean it in that way. But his apostles are always screwing up. Peter draws out his sword and chops off the ear of a temple guard, and he says, "No, this is not the way. This is, my kingdom is not of this earth. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." These very beautiful sayings. He's always with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and people who we would consider like the scum of the earth or the traitors. I mean, he would even heal Roman soldiers' children, and he had to fulfill everything, but there was no exception for him, but he would always be forgiving to his apostles and his disciples. That's the character that I saw in Jesus, a very brave man who would not fight, but who would die for what he believed in. Then you have Muhammad, who, well, the Quran says you can have up to 4 wives, but I can have more than 4 wives. I believe I was told 13, but somebody got into it and said it was 9, but he could have more than that. Or all these exceptions. Well, since I'm the prophet, that there's exceptions for me. I remember there was a battle where, and it was a battle that they didn't know if they were going to win or not. I mean, they were against a formidable force. So he stood up on a plateau with 2 coats of chainmail and prayed, and he had his guard around him, faction of cavalry, Okay, I mean, this was 2 miles away from the battle, overlooking the battle. He was praying for the people as they fought. But he was actually in the heat of the battle. He took part in raids, but in great battles, he wasn't the one charging in head first, you know. I mean, at least we can accredit that to Che Guevara, who wasn't even wearing any type of body armor and was going head first into a fight, even though Che Guevara was an evil man. But this started to turn me, and there was things that Muhammad would say, or was reported in the Quran, and then it would be contradicted, and they said, oh, that's fine, because, and it was always situational of what would happen, of how easily the surahs would come down in his defense. When he'd do something wrong, quickly Allah would come to his rescue and say, oh, no, it wasn't wrong, this is actually a good thing. And I believe Aisha even remarked, you know, how conveniently Allah always comes to your rescue whenever you, screw up. And I saw in one the character of a great prophet, and in the other a fraud. But I was still a fierce monotheist. I still believed in monotheism. So I thought Jesus was the greatest prophet that ever lived, and he was the last prophet, and he was still the prophet. Now I'm coming to understand that that's probably the original Islamic belief. And it took me a long time to get to where I am, especially Eastern Orthodoxy, because I considered icons as idolatry, praying to saints as idolatry, praying to the Virgin Mary, definitely idolatry. The Trinity, polytheism. I mean, it was a long road from there. But I remember after I had stopped going to the masjid for a while, I ran into some friends because we were very political. There is a political wing of Islam, and it's not even a wing. It's like the difference between your forearm and your bicep. They just go together. You know, you might have the elbow, but there's the forearm and the bicep. It's not two different things. Or where does the hand end and the wrist, or the hand end and the arm begin? There's politics in Islam, and I was for the Party of Liberation, and this was the idea of taking over the world through Islam now, because Muhammad, well, I should probably go into the story at a different time, but that's basically the change that I had made. Actually learning a lot more about Muhammad shifted my view, and it wasn't the view of Muhammad that was presented to me, and I had known Muslims when they were younger, and when I was younger, wrestling with these things, you know, because in Islam it commands you to harden your heart. People saying, I need to harden my heart, you know, I feel compassion and brotherly love towards these Christians. They need to harden my heart. I found what's in the New Testament the complete reverse of that. So I think that was the clicking point, and I was still defending Sharia law and Islam and even the Islamic State up until 5-6 years ago. I mean, even after I was Eastern Orthodox, I was still defending Islam. Even after I had stopped going to the masjid and stopped practicing Islam. And even 3 years after it, I was very zealous. You know, I was looking for a political party or an army to join to go in and fight. What is this saying? But for the grace of God, there go I, or something like that. I mean, I remember people being very worried and actually calling the house because they found an American Taliban fighter, John Walker Lind, and people were kind of worried that was me. So I was very, very radical, very politicized. But I didn't see it as radical. I said, well, what about the fundamentalists? And they said, what's bad about being a fundamentalist? You're following the fundamentals of your religion, of your deen. And Islam is a religion, and it's a political system, which is not what Christianity is. Christianity severs itself from politics, which is why a lot of these things infuriate me of trying to mend. Well, your personal beliefs will always affect politics, but that's another video. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. Take it easy. So as I said, this is what my beard looks like with, without the scruffy neck hair stuff. It's actually a lot longer than it appears. Plus, I have that weird Mediterranean trait where your hair, once it gets to a certain, back in the 80s, I think everybody did. I don't want to say everybody. But the, I can remember growing up asking my father which party is the correct party. Is, Democrats or Republicans? He says, well, they're both got good points and both got bad points. That his length starts curling up. That's why I always have to be very greasy kind of hair pushed back. It doesn't get. It's not like my sister's that winds up, curl. Well, my sister who just passed curled up. I remember we always had flattening irons in our house, when I was younger. But my journey from Christianity to Islam, well, my mother is Roman Catholic, and my father was from a Muslim background. And as you know, the kids are raised Muslim if the father's Muslim, and that it's not permitted for a Christian man to marry a Muslim woman, but it's permitted for a Muslim man to marry a Christian or Jewish woman. But my parents were both very Americanized, very modern, very. They liked Reagan.